All right, we're live. This is Attorney Vincent Davis, and this is Relatives Fight CPS. And I'm joined by my co-host, Miss Georgette Truand. Good evening, Georgette. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Mr. Davis?
Good. I understand we have a guest lined up for this evening, but she's having some technical difficulties.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So so we're going to freestyle. Let's go to some comments from our social media platforms. And I guess we can just answer questions this evening that are on the different Facebook pages and the YouTube channel. So if any of you are watching and you have questions that you want to ask, just go ahead and post it. It'll be shown and I can see it on my screen and maybe we can answer those questions. Georgette, do you get a lot of calls from relatives that have problems getting children placed with them?
Yes, I do get a lot of calls of relatives, especially grandparents, and actually a great aunt called me today, and she was having issues with CPS because she had a record against her that was like 25 years ago. She was very young, and she was caught into a fight at school, and she was in the middle of the fight. Anyways, everybody was arrested. She was arrested, but she was let go. She was found innocent. And then when she tried to adopt the children, they told her because of that record, she can't adopt.
Well, were the children placed with her or no?
The children were never, they did not want to place the children with her because of that record.
Okay, that sounds like an excuse of not wanting to place the children with her.
Mm-hmm.
Because if she doesn't have a criminal conviction, I'm not sure that that can be used against her. And then even if she did have an arrest or conviction, um, that was years ago, 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, those are waived as an exception. So I'm not sure why she wouldn't be able to get the children. Where or in what county?
The case is in San Diego and she's in Ventura County. And they told her that they would not, she said, the social worker said that the case would not be transferred from San Diego to Ventura County.
Okay, so here's my number one point. What do I say for you to do if you're a relative and the social worker says, I'm not going to place the child with you?
You give her or him 25 names of close relatives or more of relatives or close friends. No?
No. That's part of an overall strategy, but the overall strategy is that the relative is going to have to file in court so that the judge can make the final decision. If the relative doesn't do that, the relative is going to have to accept the social worker's decision on the case. Now, a lot of social workers will tell you that they make the decisions, and that's not true, right? It's not true. The judge makes the final decision, but if you don't go to try to see the judge, you're stuck with the social worker's decision. So when you go see the judge, what you're going to have to do is file, if you're in California, a 388 petition, which is a request for a change of order, perhaps a de facto standing motion. And if you're a relative, you might want to check out In re Charles S. In re Charles S as in Sam. Google it. You might want to file a JV 285 form, right? Depending on your facts and circumstances, you might want to file a petition for presumed parent status. You might want to file a petition for guardianship, both temporary and permanent. And you want to get all of these things before the judge. In addition, you want to do the 25 names. But that is probably something that you should have, ask or try to do early on in the case so you don't have any problems like this. Sometimes when you go to court with just one relative, and don't forget it's friends or relatives, you just go with one person. It's easy for the social worker to say no, especially if the relative lives outside the county. Now, you said the child is in San Diego. and the case is in San Diego, but the relative lives in Ventura.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to tell you something, and this is going to seem very odd to you and maybe odd to a lot of the people watching. You don't have to live in the same county as the case. You can live in Ventura for a case in San Diego. There's
Mm-hmm.
no happenstance, there's no reason, geographic reason, not to place the child. You could live in Las Vegas. You could live in New York, Florida, Oklahoma.
I know that part, and I told her that, and I believe the social workers don't want to do that because that county would lose the funding.
That's a theory. That's
Yeah.
a
Mm-hmm.
that's a theory. To be honest with you, I think it's a really good theory
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know of any reason why they wouldn't want to place with a relative outside the county. There's no reason other than, hey, we'll lose power or
Mm-hmm.
decision-making process. But you know what? When you transfer counties or states or even countries, foreign countries, um, there are provisions for those other counties, states, and countries to get involved to provide the supervision. So San Diego is not the only person that can supervise this case. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question we had was from Jessica Sims. Do you have any contacts in Hawaii? Haven't been to Hawaii in years, and I'm sorry I don't have any contacts, but you might want to call your local bar association and ask for their lawyer referral service. Most bar associations have one. And, from what I remember, Honolulu's, pretty big city. So I'm sure they have a bar association, and you'll be able to get referrals to CPS attorneys in your area. Okay, Carissa says they seem to use any excuse. Carissa, I'd have to agree with you. When they don't want to place with that relative outside the county, they come up with some doozies. That's why I say what Georgette mentioned, give me 25 names. I got a case right now where I have my client giving me 100 names. And there's a reason for that, but 100 names, can you imagine 100 names of friends and relatives? How are they going to say no to all 100 of those people?
They do, Vincent.
You've never heard them say no to 100 people. You've never
But
heard that.
I've
Because
heard,
most people give 2 or 3 names, 10 or less names at most.
no, in fact, in Nevada, a caller said to me that he gave her 58 names.
58 is still less than 100.
But they refused 58 names.
Okay, well, they probably didn't even try to investigate 58 names because it would take them forever to do that. Did the Mr. 58 names go to court and file the paperwork that I suggested?
He said
No.
that his attorney said he was going to do that, his court-appointed attorney, which I really feel they're all useless. He said he was going to file it, and then he found out later he'd never filed the 58 names.
Okay, if he's a relative, I'm surprised that he has a court-appointed attorney.
No, he was involved. He had custody of the child, and they removed the custody from him.
He was a relative?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if his lawyer didn't file it, I don't know what to say about that, but he can go talk to another lawyer.
Yeah, and there's a thing too that I was thinking about. There's something, a question in my mind that I would like to address the public. So what I don't understand is why would they place the children with the family member, right? And then 3 to 6 months later, they take the children back from them and come up with excuses that was never there before. I feel like it's like a circle. It's like they filter, they come back around, they remove the kids again, and then they go through the same motion again. And then they get more funding and they make more excuses. And then all of a sudden the child is in foster care. So I guess that's why I don't understand, but I get so many calls from relatives that had the kids and then they come back and take them from them. And then they keep making excuses. So I feel like it's becoming a pattern where they just steal kids again, and then they say, well, we found out that relative is this and this and that, or we got an anonymous call. But who made the anonymous call? They don't know. So how do we know that they didn't make the anonymous call or they didn't make it up?
You don't know. And
Exactly.
you won't have any resolution until you do what I suggest. And then if you go to court and the judge denies it, you can always appeal it to a higher court,
Mm-hmm.
California Court of Appeals, perhaps even to the California Supreme Court. Maybe the right case to the United States Supreme Court. Maybe. But you just can't rely on the social worker's decision to say no. All right. So April Lynn asks the question, what if the social worker tells parents they have to purchase bunk beds if they want children to stay with relatives? And maybe if they want children to stay with relatives. You know, it depends on what the relatives have as far as resources and furniture is concerned. You know, if they don't have any beds for the kids, that's going to be a problem, right?
But why does it have to be bunk beds? Why can it be a room with two beds on the floor? Why does it have to be bunk beds? That's her
That
question.
Yeah, the problem is you don't know the facts. You don't know the size of the room. You don't know if two beds can fit in there, right? There are some minimum living standards for furniture, size of room, and all that kind of stuff. So you're just assuming that they could put in two beds. And if the room is big enough and they can put in two beds, that would suffice. You know, in some instances, you know, buying the bunk beds without buying the frames and everything and the box springs and, you know, two mattresses and all that, sometimes it's a little bit cheaper. I've been involved in a lot of cases, especially decades ago when I would represent kids and they would, you know, relatives or whoever was going to take the kids, you know, would go out and buy bunk beds at J.C. Penney's or Target, you know, or Costco, right? And sometimes it might be cheaper than buying two bed frames with headboards, two mattresses, two box springs. Because a lot of bunk beds, you can just throw two mattresses on it and you're good to go, right? So April, it depends on the situation. I need to know more facts, but you know, if the relative doesn't have beds for the kids, they're going to have to get those beds. All right. Virginia Love says, hi, I've been fighting DCS for almost 2 years. I've complied. I have my next court on the 16th. The case manager has said she has never seen someone do as much as me, but I'm wondering why they. Okay. Let's see if she posted something else. Okay. Why they just took my newborn. You know, that's a good question. I mean, if they've done everything, if you're doing everything, they shouldn't have taken your newborn. I'm not a Virginia lawyer, but in California, they would have had to have a brand new detention hearing. And at that brand new detention hearing, if you indeed have done everything that you're supposed to do, the judge may not have ordered the child detained. All right. All right, here. Go ahead.
Why is CPS? Why is there some social workers friends with the foster parents? Like, there's a lot of parents. I mean, a lot of grandparents who actually call me and tell me that the social workers and the foster parents are very close, and then they find out that the social worker is related to the foster parent. Then what can they do at that point?
They can file a complaint.
What if the social workers did get the complaint in writing from them via email to the social worker and her supervisor, and no one has done anything about it?
Well, they're complaining to the wrong people. Why would you report the complaint to the fox? It's like the fox guarding the chicken coop. Now, as you remember on a lot of my shows, and I've even mentioned on this show, you shouldn't file a complaint to your county social worker to the county office, because the probability of you getting some type of favorable resolution, is low.
Mhm.
So I've told people many times, file your complaint with the state office of Department of Social Services,
Mhm.
file your complaint with the Department of Health and Human Services, the federal government in DC. And if you go online, they have a complaint form right there online. Or if it's somehow violating civil rights, file it with the United States Justice Department, Civil Rights Division. You're saying, well, it's like saying, oh, the police beat me up, and then I'm going to go to the police and make a complaint. How's that going to work out for you?
Mhm.
It's probably not.
Mhm.
Probably going to have to call the FBI or the Justice Department, the federal Justice Department, and make a complaint, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people think that if I just make this complaint, that they're going to bend and they're going to, do what's right. That's not true. They're going to double down. They're going to triple down. You got to make sure that you make your complaint to the right person. Okay, Eileen's, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. They told my husband and I that we passed our inspection with shining stars and everything looked great, but that our nephews have been with foster parents for 18 months and that they are already attached. They are 2 and 8 months.
Ugh.
Okay? So, if you have been listening to earlier, what are you supposed to do? Let's see. Let's test Georgette. Georgette, if you are our list, what are you supposed to do?
Ah, she's supposed to send. Don't put me in the spot right now, Vincent. Just,
This is great. Even my co-host can't answer that question.
I
Okay,
can't. It's just you put me on the spot. Don't do that.
Arlene, this is what you're supposed to do. First, number one, depending on what state you are, talk to a CPS attorney. That's, number one. Get some advice. Learn the law. Find out what you have to prove to convince the judge to give you the children back. And if you're in California, you're going to file that de facto motion. You're going to file that 388 petition. You're going to file that JV 285. You're going to file that petition for legal guardianship, temporary and permanent. You get my drift? So you want to make sure the judge knows and makes the decision. And depending on what stage of the case you're at, the judge might rule in your favor. Now, this points out a very big problem that I tell people at the very beginning, and they just don't believe me. These children have been with the foster parents. How long was it? 18 months. Why did the relatives wait 18 months before they did something? You got to be there at the first hearing, the second hearing, the third hearing, to let the judge know that you want the child. Now, what happens a lot of times, because the social workers are supposed to be looking for you and trying to find you, what happens a lot of times when people come forward in 18 months, the first thing a lot of social workers say, and some children's attorneys, well, where have they been all this time? Well, they didn't know, right? The social worker never looked for them and found them, right? The parents may not even wanted to tell them because they're embarrassed. I have a case right now where I asked for relatives and my client told me straight out, "You're not going to call them, are you?" I said, "I'm not. The social worker is." "Oh, no, I don't want that. I don't want them to know that I have a CPS case." But the only person that's really getting hurt is the child, right? The child has rights to be with relatives. And we seem to kind of like overlook that if it's a good foster home. Now, I have no doubt I don't know all the facts and circumstances, but I would bet money that these foster parents are properly taking care of these kids, and there's a bond formed, psychological, emotional, physical. What are you going to do? You're going to take these kids out of the home, the only parents they've known for the last 18 months. Now, don't forget, they're 2 and 8 months, and place them with relatives. The question becomes, is there going to be any detriment to that child when they're moved? And does that detriment outweigh being placed with family? So my motto is, come early, come often. People laugh at me when I say, let me have a list of 25 relatives. That's no joke. I need 25 people. So if they find something wrong with 1 through 5, I got 6. I got 7, 8, 9, 10. I just told you, I actually am requiring one of my clients to give me a list of 100 friends and family members. You think I'm not serious about getting these kids placed with friends or relatives? With 100? Yes, I am. Because remember, if the social worker says no to all 100 and the judge ends up agreeing, you're going to have to appeal that. What's that going to look like to an appellate court? Davis gave them a list of 100 people and they said no to all 100? Right? So come early, come often. It's not just relatives, it's family, friends too, people. Family, friends too.
I have something to add on there also. When people when it's a CPS investigation, don't assume just because it's a CPS investigation and you're a great parent that they're not going to take the children from you. And oftentimes I tell people, get an attorney now before it gets worse. And the longer that you have the case, from the beginning to the end, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And then people say the social worker lied, the reports are not accurate, and all this. But if you had an attorney from the beginning, when it's an investigation,
Right.
the right attorney, that is a juvenile dependency attorney, you can prevent a lot from happening.
Now, folks, I want you to take a look at this comment in this question. Notice in the second to the last line, it says the children have been with the foster parents 18 months. The children are only 2 and 8 months old. So the 8-month-old has been there his or her entire life. The 2-year-old has been there since she was 6 or he was 6 months old. So you literally are taking a child from a foster family who no doubt the children have bonded with this family, physical, emotional, psychological. So when I say come early in the case, come early in the case. Do not assume that the parents are going to do everything to get the children back. Don't assume that, because many times it doesn't happen. And then the relative says, well, I'll come forward after 18 months. Those hurdles that you're going to have to jump over are very tall. Not impossible, but they're very tall. Okay, here's Carissa. What if the judge doesn't want you in the courtroom? Now, I'm assuming, Carissa, you are referring to relatives. So the way the rule is written in the California Rules of Court, the judge has discretion to allow you, if you're a relative, to be in the courtroom. However, if somebody on the case, like the social worker's attorney or the minor's attorney, objects to it, the judge then has to make a decision whether privacy outweighs your right to be there. Now, if you're a person that has filed the paperwork that I've recommended, you're going to get to be there at least for those hearings until the judge tells you yes or no about the child being placed with you. So that's a way to solve that problem, is to file something with the court so that you can be in the courtroom. Okay? Let's go to another question.
Well, I'm sorry. What did you say? They can file something in the court to be in the courtroom? Is that what you said?
They can file some of the documents that I have suggested or recommended earlier
Mm-hmm.
in the hearing.
Okay.
Not in the hearing, earlier in the show. Okay. Okay, here's Carissa again. What if you've done all of this and CPS worker and the court will not let you in even though you had a prior guardianship? Now, if you had a prior guardianship and you're still the guardian, you get to be in court represented by an attorney. If you don't have a guardianship, all right, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to implement the strategy that I gave at the beginning of the show. 388, de facto, presumed parent, guardianship. You're going to have to file all of those. Okay, April. But remember, the parents are supposed to be neglecting the children's needs, but had to purchase 2 sets of bunk beds for children to be placed with relatives. Okay, I've seen that happen many times. You know, social worker says something about getting the children placed with a certain relative. And, you know, as a last thing, the social worker says, okay, you got to buy these bunk beds. And instead of fighting that and going back to court, what I recommend, if at all possible, buy the bunk beds, argue about it later. All right. Because theoretically, the social workers the county is going to have to pay you back money for taking the children in. Let's go to another question. Carissa, I believe you're right. It's all about the money. Carissa, it's America, girl. It's always about the money. But a lot of people don't believe that. Okay, here's Chris again. I gave 50 names and they wouldn't even let me in the court room, which less than you see the judge, much less than you see the judge. Okay, I'm not clear about that last phrase, but I didn't say give 50, that's all you do is give 50 names. I gave you a list of 4 or 5 things to file. You got to act like you belong in court. Okay? And that means filing something in the court in front of the judge. Okay. Here's another question from Charnel. Can CPS take your kids if you don't sign a safety plan? The answer, unfortunately, is yes. Now, whether they're going to be able to keep them, that's a whole different question. But, you know, I've had people tell me CPS has detained children for not signing a safety plan. I've even had them argue that in court. And I've even seen that, you know, judges rely on that argument and not releasing the children back to the parent. Even if the parent says, okay, now I'll sign the safety plan because now I see you guys are really serious. Right? So I don't know the facts and circumstances, but if you're going to be able to keep your children by signing the safety plan, I suggest you sign it and then call an attorney and figure what you should do. Right? I represented a lady a few years ago who brought a civil rights case against the county. Something had happened to one of her children. They took all the children, and she signed a safety plan. But I don't know if I suspect this is required by federal law. But if you look at the bottom of the safety plan or on back of it, it says that you have the right to withdraw your safety plan at any time. Right? And in this particular case, she withdrew the safety plan. They never gave her kids back for almost, 7 or 8 months. And then she brought a lawsuit. We won that lawsuit because she withdrew the safety plan. And at the beginning of the case, the county lawyer was always telling me, or the lawyer representing the county, oh, your client signed a safety plan. Your client signed a safety plan. And then it became an issue of whether she withdrew the safety plan. And in a deposition, one of the county social workers testified, probably unknowingly, yeah, mom called me every day, once or twice a day, saying that she didn't want to do the safety plan anymore. She wanted her kids back. She called like over a 2-week period canceling the safety plan. Okay, here's Kecia. What if you have to get baby beds and they tell you wait until they inspect? If they tell you you need baby beds and you're a relative, get the baby beds and save the receipt just in case. Because when they come to inspect, you better have everything squared away. And if you don't have the beds, they're going to deny you and say, okay, you're not approved because you didn't have the beds. And then you're going to say, well, you told me to wait. And they're going to say, we never told you that. So if they tell you you need something, get it, save the receipt, maybe you can take it back. All right, here's Kecia Thomas. Can you tell them that you want your youngest child to be removed to someone else? The answer is yes, especially if it's a relative, or especially if that person who has the child is interfering with your family reunification service. So let me give you an example. Let's say they take my kid away and they place the kid with a foster parent named Georgette. And Georgette's telling my kid, oh, Davis, Vince is a terrible dad. You don't ever want to go back to him. Okay. Georgette would be interfering with family reunification services, which is the law. And that would be a good basis. If you're in California, there's actually a section that's rarely quoted. It's in the 16,500 sections about things that you can do if a foster parent is, interfering with your family reunification services. So talk to your lawyer about that. Carissa, why are CPS workers best friends with foster care moms? Georgette kind of asked that question earlier, but then went in another direction. Here's the reason why. Let's assume Georgette is a social worker, okay? And she gets these calls and she gets these children that are detained. She's got to place them somewhere, or she's got to spend the night with them at the office. So foster moms become like the life, what do they call that when you throw a drowning person? A life vest for social workers. Oh, I'll take that kid off your hand. Oh, thank you, Georgette. You're a lifesaver. So, in any business and any working relationship, when you work with people, human beings form relationships. And they don't have to be best friends or, socialize, but, they have a relationship with them. People ask me all the time, do you know so-and-so attorney? Yeah, I know him. Do you consider yourself friends with him? Well, I guess I do. We're colleagues. I mean, I've never socialized with him. I've never gone out to break bread with him. I've never been over his house. He's never been over my house. But, we do consider ourselves friends or colleagues. So same thing with foster mothers, foster parents, and social workers. They form relationships. That's what human beings do when they interact, is they form relationships. Okay, Seattle Soto. Can I tell you my story? Most definitely. You can tell us your story. Kecia, again, what if they inspect and say no after complying to everything they ask from you? Okay, Kecia. Georgette, can I put you on the spot?
Sure, Vincent.
What if they say no, your grandma, and you've complied with everything, or your aunt, or your second cousin, and they say no, even after you comply with everything? What do you do?
You petition.
Very
You send
good.
a petition.
You have to go to the court,
Mhm.
and you have to file if you're in California, your 388 petition, your de facto motion.
Mhm.
your petition, your JV 285, right? Your petition for guardianship, all right? You should talk to a lawyer before you do that because you might only have one bite at the apple, but you go see the judge. That's the point. You don't rely on the social worker's decision. You go see the judge. Let me say this again, so I want to make sure everyone understands this. Social workers do not make decisions. They might tell you they do. They make recommendations. It becomes a decision when you don't challenge it in court. Now, I'm not telling you that if you challenge it, you're going to automatically win and the judge is going to agree with you. I'm not saying that. If you go to court and say, hey, I'm grandma, I want the kid, and the judge says no, that's the judge making the decision, right? After a hearing and the presentation of evidence. And when the judge says no, you get to appeal that to a higher court. All right? But if you don't go see the judge, the social worker's recommendation becomes a decision because they know you're not going to do anything. I would say out of all the people I talk to, relatives, I'd say 8 out of 10 relatives don't even think about going to court after the social worker tells them, no, you can't have the kid.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And usually it's because of the way the social worker has said it. And it's led you to believe that the social worker makes all the decisions in the case. Not true. Okay? So if a social worker is making a decision that you don't like, you got to go see the judge. But you need the appropriate vehicle. You need the right car to get you there. 388, de facto motion, JV 285, petitions for guardianship. You know that you'll need those things. You can't just walk up into court and say, hey, judge, I'm the grandmother, give me the kid. No, you got to do it the right way. What does the law require you to prove? What kind of evidence do you have? All right. That's why I say to all of the relatives, please talk to a lawyer in your area so that you can figure out what to do and do it the right way. All right. Charnel, can CPS give you a child back if another parent gets his 2 bio kids back?
That doesn't make sense. Okay, that doesn't make sense.
Charnel, I'm confused on that one. Go ahead and repost and hopefully we can get to you because I'm not sure about that. Okay, Carissa, hire a private attorney that can be trusted. I agree with that. All right, April, if a parent reports a foster parent and they are being quote unquote investigated, are the parents supposed to be informed of the results of the investigation? ? That's a really good question. The answer is no, and let me tell you why. Generally, especially here in California, when you report child abuse by a foster parent, the person who really has authority over the investigation, I mean, your social worker might investigate it, your county social worker, but it's actually a state social worker with community care licensing. And that becomes a case, foster parents or the state of California versus community care licensing versus the foster parent. And that's a whole private case administrative procedure. You as a parent don't have automatic access to that. Now, you can get it, but you got to go probably through an attorney to get it. All right. And it may not, as crazy as it sounds, if your kid's being abused by a foster parent, it may not have anything to do with your case about you getting your child back. I know that sounds crazy, but it's that old legal analysis where things don't make sense. All right. All right, here we go. Arlen's. Our nephews are in Kern County, California, and we are in Texas. We sent application back as soon as they were taken away, January of 2019, and we just got approved about 3 months ago. Let me tell you why that took so long. You probably didn't talk to an attorney in California, and they probably ordered what's called an ICPC, Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children, where California asked Texas to investigate you as a relative foster care placement. Sometimes those can take months. All the while, the children are developing a relationship with the foster parent. What you need to do is you need to go to court and ask the judge to order an expedited ICPC. Keyword, expedited. Expedited means that they have to make an investigation and a decision within 30 days, or there's actually severe penalties on the receiving state. So, expedited ICPC, and then you won't have the Arlene, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, you won't have Aylin's problem of waiting 2 years. Okay, Charnel, makes them want to retaliate. Okay. What if you're told it's a legal matter, we won't talk to you? They are stealing the children. Well, you already know the answer to that, right, Georgette? What do? You go see a lawyer and you file your paperwork. See, the comments that I'm getting, I'm getting the feeling that everyone is taking or falling into this trap. Social worker makes decision. Social worker doesn't make decision. I keep telling everyone that.
Yeah, but they have control, Vincent. They have control. You keep telling people that, but you're not dealing with them like they are. They have control. They have control. They go and bring police officers. They bring the sheriff department. They make they create this chaos, this bulliness everywhere. So yeah, people ask the same questions because there is really no other. There's no solution. You can get an attorney, but a lot of people cannot hire an attorney because they can't afford one, and they have to stick with their court-appointed attorney. So we have to kind of.
Well, it's worse than that because relatives don't get court-appointed attorneys in most cases.
Okay, right. But I'm talking about in general, some parents, okay, in general, or a guardian, a legal relative who had custody of a child. What I'm saying, they are given a court-appointed attorney. If they adopted a child and then they went back and took the child from them, then they do get a court-appointed attorney. Am I correct?
Yeah, but we're talking about relative placement. You're talking about something completely different.
I know, but I'm saying in general, what I'm saying is they get a court-appointed attorney. They can't hire an attorney.
See, but that's one of the problems with the analysis. You're talking about generalities. In these situations in the law, especially these CPS cases, you got to be very specific. You can't talk in generalities.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, if you believe that the social workers have control, that is, you've already lost the case. Just give up. Just walk away. Wash your hands. I'm telling you right now, after almost 35 years as a lawyer, all right, 30 years doing these types of CPS cases, thousands of them, social workers do not have control. If you believe they have control, then you're starting from underneath the table.
Then if they don't have control, why do they go grab a police officer or two and without a court order, and then they steal children? Why is the police supporting them with this? Why do the police have to go without a court order to remove children at 2:30 in the morning from the grandmother or the grandfather or the great aunt? Why?
Are you talking at the beginning of the case?
Yes, at the beginning of the case. Actually, I got a text message right now from one of the callers. She texted me. She doesn't want to post it. So she's asking me why, if social workers have no power.
Let me answer the question.
Okay.
Because you asking it 5 different ways isn't going to change the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the answer to the question. Because the law allows them to at the beginning of the case. Okay, so you remember I tell you about the 5 modules, each module is different from the other.
Yeah.
There's different legal tests, there's different evidentiary tests, there's different civil procedures. At the beginning of a case, if a social worker believes that there is an exigent circumstance, she can call up the police and take the child. Most of the time, they do have a court order or warrant. It might be based on false facts, but at least they got the warrant. And what happens is a lot of times police are trained to do what the social worker tells them. That's the law. They're supposed to be helping the social worker. So, and a lot of times, in the end, the social worker gets sued, and the police officers are sued as well because they shouldn't have done it. They should have evaluated whether there was an exigent circumstance, but they don't do that. I mean,
Actually, some cops do that. They do. Some officers, I was told, they actually told the social worker, that's the house. There's nothing wrong with the kids. They're sleeping. There's the house is clean. There's food in the refrigerator. There's nothing wrong. They have no criminal records. And the police is telling the officer, or the sheriff department, or the officer in general is telling the social worker, why are you removing the children? What is the cause? And she tells the officer, do what I say. And that's exactly what she tells the officer.
right.
Do what I say.
And if the officer does what she says and she's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
officer will get sued.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But people ask this question: can a social worker do blah blah blah? Invariably, the answer is yes. A social worker can do anything she wants. The question becomes, can she be held accountable for it? And that answer is yes. Okay. My grandmother used to tell me this. I was raised by my grandmother, and she used to tell me this all the time. Don't get mad. Get even. Because, they got the guns, they got the badges, and at that moment in time, what, you want to get arrested? No. Doesn't matter if you're right, you're going to jail.
I wonder if a police officer's kid is being taken away from them from a social worker. I wonder how they would react.
Not
I
good.
wonder how they would react. I'm sure.
Not good.
I wonder if a social worker even has her kid snatched from her. I wonder how she would react.
I've represented law enforcement and social workers in dependency cases.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Trisha says de facto. No, it's DEFACTO, de facto parent. And if you're in California, what de facto parent means is you're basically the person who acted as a parent for the child at some point in the child's life. Charnel says, did they take the 8-month-old right away? I'm not sure what she's referring to. Trisha, JV 285. Yeah, if you're in California, there's a form. It's called the JV 285. Just Google it. It's what friends and relatives should be filing. And it's a multi-page form, and it basically alerts the judge and the social worker that either you want custody, you want visitation, you want to take the kid to the park on a regular basis or to a football practice, something like that. Kecia, what if you did all of that? Well, Kecia, I hope you're going to get an attorney and go to court and let the judge decide. And if the judge doesn't decide in your favor, that you consider talking to your attorney about appealing.
Take it to a higher court, like Vincent said.
Right. There is nothing that most people can do other than get these things ironed out or decided in a court of law. Nothing. You don't have the guns, you don't have the badges, right? The law doesn't, basically gives the social worker a lot of power, right? I mean, there is something you can do. You can vote and change the law. But aside from that, you're just going to have to, bite your lip and go to court and fight it out. I did a case many years ago, and, I've represented this gentleman a few times. They came to his house to detain the children away from the mother, but not from him. He gets into a verbal altercation with the social worker. So the social worker detains the kid from him as well. We go to court within, I think, 72 hours, and the judge, this particular judge, releases the kids back to um, the father, but the mother can't live at home. That doesn't always happen. A lot of judges might take his belligerence as some form of anger management that could be a quote unquote risk to the child. So, you know, the best thing is lawyer up. All right. Let's go to the next question. Carissa, do it fast or they take your kids, hire a private attorney, trust nobody. Okay. Kecia did that. Get the layer, get them now, you will lose them.
She meant to say, get a lawyer, get them now, or you will lose them.
Okay. All right. They kept telling us that because of COVID, everything was delayed. I sent them messages and calls. Well, it was a little bit more than COVID in your case because you waited 18 months. Sometimes they don't act upon these things because they don't want to place California kids in Texas. I was burping my son and he startled and I dropped him one on the carpet at 2 weeks. I rushed him to the ER and later they sent us home. I got a call the next day. They said they missed a fracture in his here goes in his leg, so I brought him right back in. That night they took all 3 of my children. The older 2 have been returned, but our newborn is still placed with this grandmother. We have been doing everything they've asked of us, and and we have an expert that has found radiographic evidence of a metabolic bone disease. All right. So let's see, is there a question? No. So that reminds me of a story. Many years ago, I represented a gentleman who was alleged to be a Mexican gang member. And it was alleged that he had broken the bones on a young child, a young baby, his baby. He was also arrested and was being prosecuted for that same thing. I represented him in the children's case, the CPS case, and in the criminal case. Well, he kept telling me, and I really believed him that he did not do anything to this child. He would never do anything to this child. And so I had or requested what they call the brittle bone disease test. And it's prevalent in Latinos. So I noticed Seattle Soto. But anyway, before the test results could come back, he got desperate, kidnaps the child, and runs off to Mexico. Then the test results come back saying, obviously, this kid has brittle bone disease, right? And, he didn't do it. But he had kidnapped the child from foster care. So it kind of made a bad situation worse. Long story short, he comes back, he gets arrested on a traffic stop. And they end up dismissing the CPS case because the kid, had this brittle bone disease. And basically, if you, pull the kid the wrong way, you'd break bones or the cartilage. Young kids don't have bones yet. But anyway, so he was being prosecuted. And I remember going to court and informing the judge of the brittle bone disease, and the judge said, well, told the DA, well, I guess you're gonna have to drop that charge. You probably can't prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mhm.
And the DA agreed, but the DA then said, well, we're gonna prosecute him on the kidnapping, right?
Mhm.
And that was another whole ordeal. Um, I think the judge thought I was going to take a deal for the guy, and the guy, my client, didn't want to take a deal. He was basically willing to go in front of 12 people and argue that he was being falsely accused of something, and that's why he did what he did. And maybe that would be, some type of jury nullification. But people with these brittle bone diseases, um, are accused oftentimes of some type of heinous child abuse.
Mhm.
And it wasn't child abuse at all, right? It wasn't child abuse at all. Um, okay, it says, Rissa Moore, I'd love to speak with you. Are you talking about me or about Georgette? Because you can just get in touch with either of us by calling our phone number, which is in the lower right-hand corner, 888-888-6582. Okay, here's Carissa. We were also told court was behind closed doors due to COVID. They're trying to take my grandson hire attorney. Parent weren't allowed in court after father completed everything. They never intended to give the child back. My son hired a private attorney. Nothing is more important than your child. My son is working 7 days a week to hire an attorney. Okay. Lee says, really mentally just scared and don't know what you say to the CPS worker without being written up like we're being insulted or threatening, and then it's almost like a witch hunt and the battle begins.
Probably.
Yeah. So Lee, let me tell you this, and I get a lot of strange looks in courtrooms when I fess up to doing this. I tell a lot of my clients, I told a lady today, um, I would suggest you don't speak to the social worker unless I'm present or one of my attorneys is present. Now, I'm not telling you don't speak to the social worker. Don't speak to the social worker unless I'm present. Now, you have a constitutional right when dealing with a governmental agent to be represented by a lawyer. And a lot of social workers, minors attorneys, they don't want to hear that. So you have to make a decision. If you talk to the social worker in your instance with those allegations that you put down, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, it's going to be a 10. And if you don't talk to the social worker without me, it's going to be a 5, right? It's never going to be a 0. So you're going to have to take the less of two evils, right? And that's with saying, I won't talk to you unless Davis is present. So today on the phone, I had a long conversation with a client. She has a hearing coming up in a couple of weeks. And she says, oh, Mr. Davis, they invited me to a CFT meeting. You didn't tell me? No, I didn't think you needed to know. Didn't I tell you don't talk to social workers unless I'm present? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So she texts the social worker and says, hey, I'm not going to be coming to the meeting unless Mr. Davis is allowed to attend as well. And of course, that will start some rumbling and trouble. But she has the same thing you do, Lee. Every time she talks to the social worker, there's some uncanny, allegation made about her being rude or defensive or violent. You know, social. I used to be an accountant, a CPA, and there was something called pencil whipping. All right, social workers can pencil whip you by writing things in a certain way that may not just be accurate. Okay, Rissa, Judge, well, oops, we're not going to mention any names there. says, I shall stop texting. I'm not mad. I just don't like seeing these things keep going on because it's showing how naive us Americans are about little civil rights, and now we need lawyers to get, let's see, get really mentally just scared and just don't know what you say to the, okay, I see, that was a continuation. Okay. Mary says, CPS always wins. They get away with it all the time.
That's true. Not always, but they get away with a lot.
I agree with you. Not always.
Not always.
Yeah. All right. We have come to the end of our show. If you guys want to ask any further questions, go ahead and post on Facebook or on YouTube on this channel, or give us a call at 888-888-6582 and ask for Georgette or Vincent Davis, and we'll see if we can hook you up with a free consultation or something like that. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening this evening, and I want to thank my co-host, Miss Georgette Truman. How'd you like that? Karen and I, the magic of TV.
TV, right? The magic.
So I want to thank Georgette for being with us. Georgette, I want you to check with the lady. Was her name Kecia? She was supposed to be our guest tonight. She just, was having all types of technical difficulties. I want to remind everyone about our show tomorrow night. It's called Fight CPS, the Civil Rights Edition. And that's co-hosted by Amanda Cisco. So Amanda is a CPS victim back in Virginia, and she's also a law student or a paralegal student. So she always has interesting perspectives. And don't forget our new show that starts Friday, hosted by Brian Hamilton, The Real Victims of CPS. And it's a show where we try to get prior foster children, who are most likely, in most cases, adults, to come on the show and talk about what really happens in foster care. And sometimes it just makes me wonder, are we doing the right things, taking kids away from parents for, marginal risk, in my mind, and then putting them into the foster care system where sometimes it's even more risky and dangerous. You could be, you see it on the news all the time, foster parent being arrested for abusing a child. But not only do you have to watch out for the foster parents, you got to watch out for the other kids in the foster home. Sometimes the other kids may abuse the child. So there's, I'm not saying all foster parents are bad. I'm not saying that, but this system isn't as perfect as people think, and there's a lot of risk when we take kids away from families. Hence this show, Georgette, relatives trying to get children placed with them.
Exactly.
All right, and don't forget the show Saturday. Saturday, the radio show, because of USC football, we're being preempted. And instead of being on from 7 to 10, we're going to be on from 3 to 5 p.m. on Saturday, Pacific time. So this Saturday, 3 to 5 p.m. I know it's only 2 hours, and I was kind of like with the producer, well, what happened to my other hour, dude? He says, you're going to get a better audience from 3 to 5. So I said, okay, whatever. All right. Thank you again, everyone. Good night, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, everyone.